'Tis the season. It is planning season, and it is my favorite time of the year. And in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum, we're going to look at how you go through that process and create the space to be great in the next 365 days. What is your process? And maybe I can give you some tips and ideas to help you create that space as we step into the next week. I'll see you in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum. Do you feel like you need to hit the pause button? Are you excited? Are you invigorated? What's going on with you right now as you're beginning to get ready to step into perhaps a new season, a new year, planning out what you might want that to look like? Today, we're going to explore how to lean into the art of planning and talk a little bit about that pause, that vision, that time to gather yourself and receive all of the ideas that might be a part of what you're going to create next. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Last week was, for me, very much about something that I don't do very often anymore. And that was, it felt like pushing. It felt like really fighting my way to the finish line, including the podcast last week. I must have hit record and play and a delete and record and play and delete so many times. And I got really scared, to be honest with you, because I felt like I might have lost my superpower. You put me in front of a camera, you put me on a stage, you put me in front of a room full of people, give me permission to talk or not, and I'll just go at it. I could talk all day. And last week, it just didn't feel right. And I did get really scared. I thought maybe I've lost my superpower because it really always felt like that is my superpower. A few episodes back, we talked about your why. This comes from Simon Sinek, and it's something that I do a lot with clients, really diving into. It's a little bit of a hybrid between what your purpose is and your mission and the vision, all kind of into one little sentence. And for me, my why statement is to live out loud. And so, me doing this podcast, me sharing real stories, sometimes maybe too much information, but it is the way that I am because my purpose, what I feel like I'm really here to do is to live out loud and share my experience. And last week, I couldn't. It just didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel like I had anything of value to say. And it was really struggling. And it was interesting that that happened at the end of a week where I felt like I was pushing through. I was fighting my way to the finish line. And it culminated in a ridiculous experience. I fought my way to eke out a few minutes of a podcast last week. You might have noticed it. It was incredibly short. That was all I could create. Trust me, the cutting room floor was full of all of the rejects, but that's what I had left last week. And so I finished eking out those 5 minutes of the podcast in time to get my butt over to go to hot yoga because I decided, look, I've wasted hours, hours trying to get myself in the mood to do the podcast last week. I'm not going to miss hot yoga because of this. So off I went. I go to hot yoga. And I was really glad that I was there. I could feel a settling happening a little bit while I was waiting for the teacher to arrive in the class and lying down in the hot room. And then as we started to move through the class, I noticed my mind was more active than it usually is. And I wasn't as present as I usually am when I'm there. It is very much for me like a moving meditation, is how they describe hot yoga. And I really do appreciate that because it's a full hour or 90 minutes of that. And it's such a gift for me to give myself. But I wasn't receiving that gift last week. And we go into this pose, which is called standing bow. There's always the same poses in hot yoga. It's the same routine every single time. So it's not like I didn't know this pose. I'd done it hundreds of times. you put your hand out, and I love how they describe it. They say, put your hand out and up like you're receiving money, like someone's giving you money, and you don't want to drop that money, right? It's such a great visual, isn't it? So you put your hand out like that, and then you grab your foot from the inside, and you're standing on one leg. It's obviously a balancing pose. And then you're reaching up, and then you're stretching forward. So I started out pretty good, did the first round, and managed to balance and was stretching, and it felt really good. We do 2 sets of it. So the second set, put my hand out, ready to receive the money, and I wasn't completely present, and I was in a hurry, which was really a good metaphor for how I had been for the entire week that week leading up to that moment. And so I'm in such a hurry to get my foot into my hand that I jam my little finger into my foot and almost broke my finger, basically. It's black and blue and very sore and swollen up like a sausage. And so then the rest of the class, I'm in pain. I stayed in class, but I was reminding myself that, slow down. It's something I tell one of my clients in particular all the time, slow down and read. And he gets that. He has it written on his whiteboard because it's such a strong truth. And I needed to hear those words last week. I needed to hear those words in yoga class last week. And I needed to slow down, and I needed to read how I was feeling, what I was doing, where my foot was, and not slam my foot into my finger. So this last few days, I've had this constant reminder, slow down and read, because the pain and the swelling in my finger is my little companion right now. That was on Sunday. So that was the end of last week. And as I said, last week felt like sprinting, pushing, fighting my way to the finish line, which happened to coincide with almost the end of the year. It was my last week at work. I am really good about doing my annual planning, and I block off when I'm going to be working and when I'm not. And I always take off several weeks over the holidays at the end of the year. I love that planning time, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And so that Sunday was really marking what would have been the end of my work week. And then I slept, and I slept so good, better than I had the entire week before when I'd been pushing and fighting my way through the week. And woke up feeling just so rested. I had a couple of doctor's appointments of stuff to take care of before the end of the year. It felt light. It felt easy. I felt like a VIP at the hospital. It was a strange experience that felt delightful. And I think it was all in how I'm showing up. And the most exciting part of the whole thing was I was excited the whole day from the minute I got up. It was like I felt my superpower coming back to me. I felt my ability to live out loud and communicate and have something that felt worthy of sharing with all of you. And I was excited to do it, which is like night and day from the week before. Every week is different. And just like you, I learn and grow from every single week. I learn and grow from the weeks where I've set myself up, either mentally or through the way that I set up my calendar to fight my way through the week. I don't do that very often, so it stands out. I'm going to say like a sore thumb, or I could say like a swollen little finger, but it really stands out when I have a week like that because it's so few and far between now. And I would imagine for you too, that the more that you do this work, the more that you are getting curious and asking questions and pausing and hopefully embracing the habit of weekly momentum. It's like fine tuning an instrument. It's not that you need to fix anything. It's that every single week there are opportunities for you to shift and grow and notice and lean more into what you want, more satisfaction, and move further away with do-overs and rewinds from what you don't want anymore. There's so much that we can learn as we look back if we do it in the right way. And so as I step into this week, I'm also excited because now officially, yes, I am on my winter break, and I'm getting excited about planning season. For a couple of decades now, I've been upgrading and fine-tuning the process of how I plan for the year. And so I wanted to share a little bit of that with you today as we step into planning season. Do you have a planning process? Do you have a time of year when you pause and you focus on vision, looking further ahead than the week? So the planning process that I do is it's very similar to what I do for weekly momentum, but obviously it's on a bigger scale and there's a few more pieces to it. So one of the first things that I actually do is I get one of these big wall calendars and I like to map out my year on the calendar. And I've really fine-tuned that process over the years. I use a color coding system so that I can map out and begin to get a feel for the year. Now, what I'm not doing here is I'm not setting clear goals or deadlines or nailing down any of the projects I'm gonna do for the next year. It's more like, for me, using a calendar as a vision board. I've never really embraced the whole vision board thing. I find that for me to do visionary work and to use my imagination and to play with different possibilities, I like to have more tangible ways of doing that. And if you're not familiar with a vision board is when you get pictures of things that you want and you put them on a board. For me, it's more about scribbling on a piece of paper, playing with different words, playing with variables that are solid and putting them together in different ways, like a jigsaw puzzle. And I see this big calendar, the big annual calendars that you can get, as a way for me to begin that visioning process. And so the first step of my annual process is to get one of those big calendars and just start plotting out ideas. Now, if you're curious about exactly how I do that, if you go to the description, you can click on the link and you can watch that video and I'll outline the entire process for you. But ultimately, what I'm doing it for is to just wet my whistle, get me kind of in the mood to start to think about planning. But what I've realized, especially this year, is that I can't even do that until I'm in the right mindset. I have to be in the right mental space before I can do anything. And last week that I was just talking about, where it was rushing and pushing and fighting, there was no capacity. If I would have started my annual planning process last week, it would have been built out of stress and frustration, all of the emotions that are lower on the emotional scale when we are doing strategizing or planning or playing with different ideas. We're doing that visionary work, the work that I often refer to as working on your business rather than in it. We need to be in the right headspace. So this week, I can definitely tell I've cleared the space. And so I did intentionally set aside this time for that, which is great. Nothing else going on so I can fully focus. And now it feels like fun. So my first tip to you around annual planning and even actually around this weekly momentum process is do it so that it feels like fun. Don't make it a chore. Don't make it something that you feel like you have to do or you have to do a certain way. It needs to feel fun for you to get the right output. That's only going to happen if you're in the right headspace when you are going through the process of visioning or planning or strategizing. So my tip number one is that make sure you're in the right mental space for it. And most certainly you don't want to be planning from a place of fear or desperation or scarcity. You might be feeling that right now, but realize that that feeling is temporary. Every 7 seconds, we can think a different thought, we can feel a different emotion. You will notice if you start to clock that. If you feel an emotion like scarcity, and then you say to yourself, okay, let me count 7 seconds. You count 7 seconds, and then you ask yourself, how do I feel right now? There's going to be a different emotion that you feel. You might not go from fear and doubt and anger all the way up to bliss and ecstasy in 7 seconds. It can happen, but you will have moved. You will have changed. So if you're feeling lower on the emotional scale, you want to wait until you've got yourself into a state where you're excited. It feels like fun. The idea of planning your week or planning your year or your quarter is something that you are excited and inspired to do, and that you're open. That's the other piece that I often struggle with clients and when I'm doing workshops around annual planning, is that a lot of times people come to their sessions with me saying, "Okay, I know what my goals are gonna be for next year." And I say, "Okay, whoa, Nelly, there a little bit. Let's rewind a little bit, literally, before you step into the next year." So what we wanna be doing is we wanna be open to the fact that we may have some ideas of where we want the next year to go. We might have an idea of what the goals might be. But what if you take those ideas you already have and you just put them to one side? You might think of it as just putting them on the back burner. You're not eliminating them. You're not saying you're not doing them. But I do find that it works best if we step into the planning process with a blank slate, with a completely open mind, so that you can then be surprised and delighted by some of the ideas that might show up when you give yourself permission to do that. So, tip two is that you want to step into the planning process with an open mind, not pre-decided on what the outcome, what the goals are going to be. Allow yourself to go through the process. Now, my third tip is for you to do the color coding, that visionary step that I just did. Ease into the idea of planning in a very gentle, easy way. You can use the color coding system that's in the video that's down below, and it'll really help you to start to get in the mood, like a little foreplay for your annual planning process. So once you've done those three things, then it's time to step into the actual annual planning process. So the first step of that is going to be to rewind, right? And this is the step that's going to be the hardest. The other things I mentioned already, the three little steps I said already, those are little fun little things that get you in the mood and get you moving in the right direction. The rubber really meets the road in this next step. Step one is the rewind of the last year. And the best way that I have found to do this is to go month by month through the last year. The ladies and I, what we do is we use the 12 life areas so that you make sure you're looking at all areas of your life. We're not just doing a plan for your work or your business. As a small business owner and a professional, you can't just plan for your business without taking in consideration your entire life because they're all so interwoven. So when you rewind to the last year, January, all the way through to December, 1 month at a time, you're going to go through the 12 life areas. And you're going to just, like a detective, go through and just acknowledge the things that happened, the things that you received, the things that worked, the things that didn't. You're not going to get into a place of judgment. And it is this practice of reflection, what I like to call make tomorrow better than today. It's something that is very simple for us to do by just getting curious and asking a few questions. So you're going to go back and you're going to look back over the last 12 months. Now, I know a lot of you have purchased your breakthrough year. There's a workbook that I have for that you can purchase. You can just write right in the workbook, taking inventory of the last year. And that's towards the back of the book in the resource section. Those of you that have the online program that have purchased already your Breakthrough Year online program, you can also find videos on taking inventory and examples in that program to help you with the process. But that's what you want to start with. You want to start by taking inventory of the last 12 months. Every single time I do this with a client, there are revelations, there are aha moments, there are insights. In fact, what I do with my one-on-one clients is I do an end of year review. So I encourage them to do the taking inventory as I just described. And then we do a 50-minute session where we talk about what worked, what didn't, and why. They begin to see patterns of things that maybe there's different seasons where they fall into different habits that are beneficial or not beneficial. They notice seasons, they notice triggers. But more importantly than anything else, every single time I do an end of year review with a client, they are floored that they achieved more, that there was more wins in the last year than they thought on first glance. If you cheat, if you say, okay, Marianne, I'm going to rewind, but all you do is just kind of think about the last year all together as one chunk, you're going to miss all of the opportunities for doing that full rewind. And here's the great news. If you have been doing weekly momentum with me and you've been pretty good about it, and especially if you have one of my 90-day planners, or maybe you've downloaded the weekly planning pages for busy professionals, you can grab those for free in the link below. If you've been using those, you have this record of the last however many weeks that you've been doing it. You can look back over the weeks to help you really get a clear picture of the last 12 months. You can mine those pages for gold because you've done a weekly rewind every week. And so now all you have to do is go back over those planners. So if you want to get started on that process and make it like baby steps, one of the things that I do is I just grab all my planners from the last year, put them in a basket along with my Your Breakthrough Year workbook, and set that aside. And I know it's ready and waiting for me, and then set aside the time to start with January. Now, one of the tools that I absolutely love for taking inventory of the last year too, and actually I've never thought about saying this, but you could use this tool as well for your weekly momentum process to look back at the last week, are the pictures on your camera. I can learn a lot looking back over the pictures, who I was, where I was, screenshots that I've taken. It gives me clues and then reminds me and jogs my memory of other things that I've done. So I find that photographs are such a great way for taking inventory. Think of yourself like a detective. You're just looking back over the last year and enjoy the process. I promise you, once you get started with it and you've got January under your belt, you'll know how you're going to do it and it's going to work for you and it's going to flow really nicely. Now, once you've done the taking inventory, then we move into perhaps a more traditional way of planning. I have a plan that I've been using. I like to call it my annual roadmap. And what I love about it is that the annual plan has half of the page. It's just a one-page plan. Half of it is the 12 life areas. And I'm getting really clear on what it would look like to live at a level 10, 1 to 10, right? Live at the top level of each of those life areas. What does that look like? Because I find a lot of times when we're not achieving something or we're feeling like something's not working or we're not happy or satisfied with something, a lot of times it's because we haven't really gotten clear on what we want. We haven't really set any expectations or got a clear vision of what we do want. So that bottom half of the plan is addressing every single one of those 12 life areas. And it's allowing you to look at what it would look like to live it at a level 10. And I have a video training for that in your Breakthrough Year program to explain that whole part of the process. There's also on the annual roadmap a place for you to write down your power words. So often people call those your values. I like to think of them as power words. They're the words that really define who you show up as when you're showing up as your best version of yourself. They're those values, those words that express what is truly important to you. And I find that once a year, and so I do it when I'm doing my annual planning, is a great time to look back over those values, to look back and to check in and see if anything shifted. I'm talking about words like freedom and connection and creativity and inspiration. Because no matter what goals you set, whether it's for the week or whether it's for the year, when you really peel back the layers of the onion of whatever that goal or that project or that to-do is, underneath it all, there's a state of being that you are craving that is driving the activities that you're doing. And so when you understand the whole point of everything is that I want to feel freedom or I want to feel connection or I want to feel creativity, you can cut to the chase. You can maybe see more creative ways of getting from A to B rather than the ways that you've thought about in the past. So knowing what's important to you and what your power words are is really powerful. The other thing that's really fun is once you've done your entire annual roadmap, one of the things that we do at the Ignite retreat is we write a vision statement based on the entire roadmap. And I love encouraging the ladies to bring in all of the power words to their vision statement. So it's vibrating with all of that energy, all of these words, all of this value that's really important to them. So back to the annual roadmap, right? So at the bottom half, the whole bottom half of this one page is your 12 life areas, what it would look like to live at level 10. Then you have your power words, your 10 power words for the year. I hope you're starting to see that this one page is something that you could look at every week when you're doing weekly momentum to just remind you and help you realign. Remember step 2 of the weekly momentum process. This one page roadmap is fantastic for helping you realign with what's important to you and also who you are as we look at that power words section of it. Then at the top of the roadmap, mainly what happens when I do this with my clients and myself is that the top half is more about work and business. And so at the top part, you're going to have room to put your one thing for the year. That is your main goal or objective for the year. Really take the time, brainstorm what you might want to do, all the projects for the year. Maybe even play through a few scenarios and pick up one thing from that mind map or that you've written down on the page and ask yourself, well, what would the year look like if I made that the main thing, the one thing? Or what if I made this the one thing, right? Almost like you're trying on different clothes. You don't want to commit to the first thing you think of. You want to take your time with this planning process. And it may be that you put together one plan with one main goal for the year, one thing, and then you set it aside and you come back to it a few days later, and you may think very differently and have a different perspective and want to make something else the main thing or the goal. That's why you really want to take your time with the planning process so you can allow it to fully blossom, the whole evolution of it to happen so that you can get the best plan that you can really align with. And for me, one of the ways to think about it is same question that I gave you last week when we did the super short weekly momentum. Where do you want to be by the end of next week, right? Where do you want to be by the end of this year? Such a great question. And once you've asked yourself that question, you're going to write down a bunch of stuff. There's not just one answer. Start to zero in on that and then ask yourself, okay, what do I need to do or create or change or get rid of? What needs to be different that's going to allow me to get to that place? That's how I zero in on what my main thing is, what my main goal is for the next year. Because I know when I've gotten clear on where I want to be, it starts to get very clear what needs to shift or change to make space for that or for my skill set to improve so that I can achieve that. Or I might need to change some of my habits so that I can set myself up for success for that. So get really clear on where you want to be by the end of the year. And then from that, pulling out what is the main thing, the main goal for next year. Then at the top of the plan, underneath that, you're going to have 2 columns. One column is 5 projects for the year, and one column is 5, are you ready for this? Not to-dos for next year, okay? So the 5 projects for the year may very well be some of those things that you wrote down when you were thinking, where do I want to be by the end of the year? You want to think of the plan as one cohesive unit. So if you look at what you want as your main goal for next year, you want to make sure that the 5 projects for the next year support you in achieving that goal. Sometimes what I see happening with clients when they're doing this as a rough draft before they come to me is they've written down projects that are pulling them in 5 different directions and not pulling them forward towards the one thing. So you want to make sure periodically standing back, looking at this annual roadmap, and you want to make sure that it's a cohesive unit, that it all works together to move you forward towards that main thing that's at the top of the page, that one goal. And then the not to-dos. Now, this easier for some people than others. In several of the episodes this year of Weekly Momentum, I brought up the idea of the not to do list. That's very similar to having 5 projects not to do, or habits, or things not to do. We want to create the space for the things that we want to do. We want to learn that when we say yes to one thing, we say no to something else, whether we do it intentionally or not. So I love this annual roadmap structure that I've created for myself and my clients because it honors that there are things that you're not going to do this year. I'm not talking about quit smoking, quit drinking, like New Year's resolution type not to do things. I'm talking about things that you may really, really passionately want to do that could be great for you, but you don't have the bandwidth to do everything. So you have to pick 5 things to do, 5 things not to do. For example, one of the things that I wrote down not to do last year was live events. And that wasn't just put on live events, do live workshops, whether it's in person or a Zoom or a webinar, or going to live events, going to mixers and conferences and different retreats and things. I realized that as much as I have gotten a lot out of those things in the past, being both a facilitator and an attendee, it takes a lot of bandwidth and space and energy. And what I wanted to create last year was making videos. And I realized that something was going to have to give. And so I chose last year to step back from live events, workshops, retreats. And instead, I put them on the not to do side of my annual roadmap. I hope this is falling into place for you. If this sounds like a planning process that would work really well for you and you want some more guidance, you've got a few options. So the option number one, you can go to my website, getitdonediva.com, and you can click on shop planners. You can scroll down, you'll see the blue Your Breakthrough Year workbook. If you want a little bit more support than that, then you can also sign up for Your Breakthrough Year. It's a program that is self-paced. I'm going to take you through everything that I just described, but in much more detail. There's a module on living life at level 10 and what that means and how to really zero in on that for the bottom half of the plan. There's the modules on taking inventory, the 12 life areas, all the downloads, all the worksheets. And then, of course, the whole annual planning process, along with examples. And you can download the annual roadmap, the actual plan itself, if you want as well. I'm going to pop the link to that down below in the description. And you can also do it with me if you want to sign up for one of my packages, my coaching packages. Many of them include that end of year review, which I've described, which will give you that accountability to get the life inventory done. And then I can help you debrief it. All of my coaching packages for the end of the year that are on sale right now all actually include a paperback copy of Your Breakthrough Year workbook, as well as the online program, so you can get started right away with all the videos, and of course the coaching from me. So it is a really nice way to move through the program if you're looking to do it with a coach. What I love about coaching people one-on-one through this program is that I can give them an extra set of eyes on that annual roadmap. I can look at it from a different direction with them. I can help them make sure that their not to-dos are really enhancing and creating the space, that the projects are all lined up and they're all moving them towards the goal for the year, and help them and witness their vision statement and the vision of what they want to create. And then what I love is that when I've worked with the client through the annual planning process and they've got their annual roadmap, then we can use that as a blueprint when we do our coaching sessions after that. So it's a great way to get started with me, and the packages all include different amounts of coaching for me to support you with that system. So I've just really quickly walked you through the annual planning process that I use with my clients, and I've been using for decades now and use myself and thoroughly enjoy. The last thing that I want to say is create that space, that pause, so that you can give yourself the opportunity to really move through that process. Now, if that means you're listening to this in January and you want to take the whole month of January to come up with your annual plan, then go for it. You're better off doing that than rushing through and just churning out a plan in one day just because you want to get it done. You want to set aside time so that you can let the ideas pop. When you start to write things down, it's like a living, breathing, evolving document. And it's a sacred ritual for me, to be honest. And that's why it became a retreat with the ladies, because there's so much ritual that we can tap into that will help us learn and grow. Other rituals that we incorporate in the Ignite retreat, for example, are once we've created the annual roadmap, as part of the process, we literally jump into the pool together to signify diving into the new year. Before we do that, we acknowledge the last 12 months and honor them and take a moment. What we've been doing recently is we've been walking around a labyrinth. I have rocks with the names of each of the months of the year, and just taking your time with a silent walk can give you closure. And I encourage you to step into your own rituals as you're closing out this season and stepping into a new season, perhaps. Begin to look at how can you feel that sense of closure, that ritual, so that you can acknowledge and honor the months that have passed, the lessons, the growth, the challenges, the things that you've let go, and you can celebrate the wins because you're pretty amazing. And you do not acknowledge that nearly enough. So as you step into this week, set aside intentionally big chunks of time to do your annual planning. I've laid out my process so you can follow that as a guideline if you'd like. I've invited you to join me and move through the process with me. If that feels right, then you can use the link below to sign up for one of the packages and do it one-on-one with me. If you feel like you need just a little bit of structure, you can grab one of the Your Breakthrough Year workbooks or the self-paced program, and you can do it yourself. But ultimately, set aside the time. It's sacred. Make it a sacred ritual. The way that you approach your planning is going to set the tone for how the next year unfolds. And maybe don't rush and push and fight your way to the end of the planning process. I'm so glad that I had my little wake up call with my finger. Don't wrestle your goals to the floor. Allow them to bubble up. Invite them to show up. And I hope that I've inspired you to honor that practice yourself as we step into the last few weeks of this year. And as we begin to close out this year, I want to say how grateful I am for you, for listening, for showing up, for downloading. We have over 250 downloads now of the podcast, and it really means a lot to me to have you along for the ride. And I want to let you know that the Get It Done Diva in me honors the Get It Done Diva in you. And I look forward to creating lots of momentum with you in the weeks and the months to come. I'll see you in next week's episode of Weekly Momentum.